Welcome to a Prevent Connect podcast, where we explore the prevention of violence against women. This is a project of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault.
When you're designing your program, that's the appropriate time to be thinking about evaluation. Evaluation is not something that you add on at the end. It's actually a component of the design. So while thinking about your curriculum, ask, how am I going to know that I got there? If I want to accomplish this, how am I going to know? What's it going to look like? I'm a big fan of clip art. You will learn quickly. So the example I'm going to use is a bystander intervention session. If you include a bystander intervention component to this, and I have to give David credit for this because this is actually an example that he has used, and I think it really is a great one, and I've just expanded on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the bystander intervention session, and we'll go through all of the learning objectives and work through the whole program. And what we've decided to do is at the end of that, we're going to hand out 3x5 cards to all of the participants, and we're going to ask them to write down how they would respond to a particular scenario. So this is a scenario. It's fairly simple. It's an all-male group that we're doing the intervention with, or doing the training with. So you're with a group of your friends, and they start talking about a particular female classmate, and they call her an uptight bitch. Some people laugh, but other people feel kind of uncomfortable. So what will you do? And that's the question that we're going to ask of them. Then we need to decide on what the criteria are, because we're going to take those answers and we're going to rank them, right? That's how we're going to decide what we think. So we decide on the criteria for what the standards for a good answer, right? Because you can't just make it up on the spot. And the criteria I came up with, what I'm hoping people are going to say in their cards, it's going to be nonviolent, it's going to be creative, it's going to recognize the humanity of the person of the woman who was called a name, and also the person that they're intervening with, right? We don't want them to dehumanize the other person. And hopefully it's going to be encouraging pro-social behavior. So those are the criteria that I established. And the value of that is that when you start doing the assessment, you'll want, ideally, you would have a couple of different people do the coding, right? So you'll each rank cards. And so in order to have the greatest likelihood for the rankings to be consistent is you set the criteria ahead of time. Everyone's looking for the same things, right? And so, there's actually a technical term for that. It's inter-rater reliability or inter-coder reliability. But part of the key here is you also need to decide what success looks like. If your evaluation comes up with 100% response, 100% success rate, then you have two possible problems there. One is maybe you weren't having high enough expectations of your participants, or the other is, as Wendy was talking about earlier, the possibility of a ceiling effect. That these are people who came into this program already having the attitudes or beliefs that you wanted them to have. And so because you haven't done a pretest, you're not as likely to know that, because this is just one component of an evaluation, right? So you want to make sure that your test is somewhat harder than, we'll get 100%. But what we're going to do is we're going to divide our answers into great, decent, and undesirable. Those are our three categories. And we want at least 60% of our students to give at least a decent answer. That's our goal. We know it ahead of time. That's what we've said. Then we actually implement it. We do the program. And I included this picture entirely for Wendy's sake, because Wendy's a soccer player. So we do the program, and we hand out the cards, and we get the cards back, and then we review them. So I have the 10 answers that the 10 students gave. So one says, I wouldn't do anything. I support my friend. How would you rate that? Great, decent, or undesirable? Undesirable. Okay, yeah. And I agree. This isn't the right answer. This is my answer, because it could be different. All right, how about this one then? How about I tell my friend to show some respect? Decent? Decent? Okay. Yeah. A little hesitation, Marcus? Yeah. It's okay. Marquise, right? Keith, yeah. Sorry. So yeah, I said it was decent. Not the perfect answer, but a pretty good one. All right, this is a long one. I'd wait until later, pull my friend aside and tell him I wish he'd be more respectful, not just of the girl he was talking about, but of his friends who were uncomfortable.
Great.
Great. Idealized, fictional. Okay, sure. All right, and we can, keep going. I tell him to shut the hell up. Undesirable.
That's decent.
Decent. Others? I think this is kind of a borderline. I actually ranked it decent, but this would lead to a good discussion, right? Because it isn't exactly recognizing the humanity of the person he's critiquing, right? But
it starts a conversation.
But it can start the conversation, exactly. So this is a borderline, and this is why it's valuable to have multiple raters.
If you've got someone who's violent, though, this will trigger them.
Exactly.
But if they're friends, they know their
That's true.
level of, if I can tell my friend shut the hell up without him going to launch over a table and punch me. So
we all hope, right?
So there's that
Yeah.
level of, if you know your friends because you guys are friends, they're not acquaintances, they are friends, I tell you to shut the hell up, you may stop, to respect me, at least to be like, okay, well, maybe I should be quiet for a moment. And then later on, we can talk about why I told you to shut the hell up, because it may have not been the proper time to discuss it at that time.
And this is exactly, and again, this is what the conversation we get to have because we've planned for this process to happen. So I wouldn't laugh or anything, but I wouldn't challenge my friend. Undesirable? Yeah, and I agree. I'm just going to go through quickly. I'd ask him how he'd feel if someone talked about his sister that way. That's sort of textbook, right? I'd remind him that he got into a fight last year when somebody said something like that about his girlfriend. Again, I think that's a pretty good one. Maybe it's only decent. I'd look at him so he'd know that I didn't like what he said, but I wouldn't say anything. Again, maybe a little bit borderline, but it's on the right track. I'd laugh pretty clearly, undesirable. And then this one, right? Something almost like this happened to me last week. I told my friend that I didn't like what he said, and he laughed at it, but then later he came up and apologized. Well, this might be even more ideal than the other one that we framed that, right? This is the one that you're going to want to quote in your annual reports and in your fundraising letters and on your website and everything else. This is really kind of the ideal answer, right? So those were the 10 cards. We went through, we ranked them. We had some discussions about the ones that were borderline, and that's great. That's what you want to do. But here were the results. So you sort out the results. We had 4 great responses, 3 decent, and 3 undesirable. And you see one of the great ones I have a double circle on, and that's because that was the one that I said, this is the one that you want to quote. So recognize that you might have an even extra benefit from that. So you get that. You sort the results. You compare them to your goal. Our goal was 6. We had 7. 7 is greater than 6, or 6 is less than 7. And so, yippee, more stars. We were successful. We did what we wanted. We win. And so then we report, we're awesome, right? We did it. We got exactly what we wanted. And so this is an indicator of the program's success. It's a very simple evaluation methodology. As you see, it took very little time, almost no money. Which is wonderful, doesn't rise to the level of rigor of pre-post test or control group comparison evaluation, but that's okay because what it does is it gives you an indicator, and more importantly, it gives you an indicator on the spot. So you can know if you only get 2 answers that are at least decent, that something didn't go as you hoped it would, right? And so you might want to revisit that topic with your group. Because you know that at the end of the semester, it's extremely unlikely that they're going to show positive results. If they didn't show positive results immediately, they're even less likely to do so later. So you know that there was something, possibly the process evaluation will help you know what that something was, but something didn't go right. And so you can know it on the spot. David raised the issue of triangulation yesterday when we were doing this exercise. And the concept of triangulation is that you want to try to measure things in multiple different ways. And so this can be one component of a very effective evaluation tactic. So you'll use this, and you'll use this in conjunction with your pre- and post-test or something else. And it's an easy, relatively low-cost, low-resource intensity opportunity to do some evaluation.
Thank you for listening to this Prevent Connect podcast. Prevent Connect is a project of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, with funding from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The views presented on Prevent Connect are not necessarily the views of the United States government, the CDC, or CalCASA. To learn more about Prevent Connect, visit www.preventconnect.org. For more information about CalCASA's mission or to show your support, visit calcasa.org. That's calcasa.org.